Hey friends, it's Trisha Morris back here with another fun project. This is the Notecard carrier portion of our Club Scrap showcase, and this will speak to the heart of all of my card makers. I've got my pre-printed instructions here, and I did include these in the project showcase shipment, so you shouldn't have to worry about finding them. They will be in your box. And then I also have the sample that I made. Now this is the original sample. I have not made a lot in this particular style, but I've made a lot of these note card carriers using different Club Scrap collections. What I love most about this is some of the latest updates to the design of this that I've made recently, and that includes these little tabs that close with these dots, hook and loop dots, to keep everything inside. And then I've also added some stabilizing to the structure so it feels really good and sturdy, and it won't easily be crushed. Plus we have the 8 cards that will go inside the envelopes. As with most Club Scrap projects, there's an orderly series of steps that we'll follow to complete the project. And that includes the need for a nice 12-inch bypass blade style trimmer. This is one we carry from Fiskars that I really love. And then I'm also using my accordion pocket file again to stay organized. So different portions of the project will be housed in different pockets of our file so that we can easily stay organized and don't have a big mess all around us. Now, when you take contents out of your kit, just be really careful not to lose track of the hook and loop dots that were included in your kit. I almost lost mine. They actually stuck to my shirt. So fair warning. Also, you'll have the envelopes, set those aside. Then there is going to be a really sturdy piece of folding board. That's the substrate that we're building the note card carrier from. And we do carry this in this beautiful matte black and also in a craft color. Meanwhile, all the rest of the papers that we've included in the note card carrier kit need to be put in order. I want you to grab all the papers in the stack, and I'm going to have you find the beautiful print included in this kit. There will be 2 copies of the print, and so you can take both of those actually and place those face down on your trimmer base. So those will be the 2 pieces that we start with when we do our trimming. Then we're going to trim a paper in the color that we have called slate. So it's kind of this greenish, grayish, bluish color. Slate is what we told it is. Then ivory, plain. Make sure it's a piece that's plain on both sides. And then navy. Then we'll trim 2 manila. Now these are extremely heavyweight papers. They're going to be great for the outer pockets of our folio too. Perfect choice for that. Next, I'm going to have you grab that folding board piece that you might have set aside earlier. We do have to trim this, so that'll be next, followed by a sheet of cut-aparts. And this one has the pottery image here in the upper left, so that'll be the next piece. And then finally, this last cut-apart will be trimmed, and that's going to help us finish our cards later on when we're done with the project. Flip everything back over to the print on the top. I'm on page 1 of the instructions, and just to give you a little bit of a heads up of how this works, the cutting diagram here in step 1 has an arrow on it, and notice that there is a letter on each piece we will be trimming. So that indicates which pocket that the piece belongs to in the sorting process. Now, if you're not using an accordion pocket file, just simply have 4 piles, A, B, C, and D. Label them if you need to, and just make sure you distribute the items to the appropriate pocket. The arrow on this diagram indicates the required grain direction for our paper. So I'm going to hold this paper, just 1 sheet of this print by an edge, rotate. This is stiff. This is flexible, so place it so it flexes easily from top to bottom. That matches the arrow on the diagram. We'll begin with a cut at 11 inches. It's a nice whole number. Make sure you have this lined up with the 11 over here, not 11 centimeters. That can be a common error. 11 inches. Make sure your paper is level at the top edge. Always stabilize on the clear bar. And then slice. Next, slide down to 7 3/4. I know I've covered this in the previous project, but just every 1/4 inch there's a column. So 7, 7 1/4, 7 1/2, 7 3/4, right there. That'll be our next trim. And then 4 1/2. I want you to allow the paper to pile up next to the blade without moving it as we go. Okay, now this piece, rotate it, and we're going to make several cuts here. The first one is at 9 3/4. get lots of practice with those 3/4. Then 6.5, 6.5, and then 3.25. 3.25. So now you just made 3 pieces that are the same size. Those will go in pocket C. And then there's also a smaller, thinner piece that goes in D. Pick up the next 2 strips to the right of your trimmer. They should be the same size, and we'll cut them at the same time. At 9, that's the nice part about this trimmer. It's very heavy duty. And then 4.5. That creates 4 panels for pocket C, and then 2 more rectangles for pocket D. This last strip goes in pocket B that actually grows up to become the belly band for our book, which is why it was important that we kept our grain direction going so that this will wrap around easily. If we had trimmed the paper in the wrong direction, it would crumple when it made its way around the little note card carrier. So our first cut is once again at 11. Okay, then 9 3/4. This is kind of a review. 8 3/4. So 8 3/4. 4.5. Rotate this 4.5-inch piece. We'll cut at 11.5 and 5 3/4. Take both of these pieces and put them in pocket A, and just so you know where we're headed, this will be the front and back cover of the outside of our folio. So every cut has a planned purpose. Then take the next strip. This is 4.25 by 12. We'll cut at 11 and 5.5. Stack these larger panels up and put them in pocket B. Those have a very special purpose too. By the way, we have created just a few little narrow scraps. I'm going to set those aside, but not throw them away. Now you have a 1 by 12. We'll trim at 11.5 and 5 3/4. You just made 2 narrow strips. Those go in pocket A, and they will end up covering the spine on the inside and outside of your book. Next, this isn't all that large, it's only 1.25 by 12. We'll trim this one horizontally at 9.5 and 4 3/4. And then these 2 pieces go in pocket B. Those are going to cover the tabs. And we have a few scraps. Moving on to the slate. Take this next piece. This is that weird color that I love. It's gorgeous. And hold it by its edge. We need to study the grain. This is very stiff. This is very flexible. And this time I want the paper dipping easily from the left to the right. We'll cut at 8.5. Now, by the way, card makers, this is a great formula. Step 3 of these instructions to make cards efficiently. Okay, so 8.5. Oh, that'll get your grain positioned correctly as well. Then rotate and cut at 11 and 5.5. I'm going to have you set these aside to be scored, those 2 card bases, and then you have the narrow strip. I'll have you cut at 5.5. And that goes in pocket D, along with this other little one. Both of these small strips, pocket D. You should have 1 more strip of the slate left. It's 3.5 by 12. We'll cut at 9.5 and 4 3/4. The 2 larger panels go in pocket C, and then the smaller one in D. Next, take the ivory, check your grain direction, make sure it dips easily left to right, and take the navy. Same thing. Check your grain dipping left to right. And we'll cut these at the same time, the same way we just cut the slate. So I had you practice in the first round with just 1 sheet. Now we're using 2. We'll cut at 8.5, rotate, cut at 11, and 5.5. You just made 4 card bases. We'll set them aside to be scored. And once again, pick up the narrow strips. We'll cut them both at 5.5. Now, do you see how it's difficult almost to see exactly where the 5.5 is? If you want, you can bring this down. Make sure it's level, but you might see a little better. And these go in D, just like before. Here we have some strip, or one larger strip yet, 3.5 by 12. We'll take both of them and cut at 9.5. And 4 3/4. Both of these go in pocket C. And again, rectangles for pocket D. That is the end of step 3. And again, this is a formula that you can use with 12 by 12 papers just to make standard cards with multiple panels. Now, take the manila. This is really heavyweight paper. I think I'm just going to have you trim one at a time. Is that all right with you? I hope so. Okay, we'll cut at 11 3/4. It even sounds different when you slice it. And 6 1/4. Rotate and trim this at 10.5. Gather up this larger and smaller piece, set it aside to be scored. Then we're going to turn this into a card base. So I need you to cut at 8.5. Set this aside to be scored. Take the rectangle and trim at 4 3/4. Larger piece goes in pocket C and the smaller one in D. This, my friends, is a scrap. Let's repeat this. Check our grain. Make sure it dips easily, top to bottom. That's illustrated in your diagram. We'll cut at 11 3/4 and 6 1/4. Rotate. Cut at 10.5. Gather up both pieces. Those are going to become the pockets of our folio, so set those aside. Trim this at 8.5 to make a card base. 8.5. Set it aside. Rectangle. Cut at 4 3/4. Large piece, pocket C. Small piece, pocket D. And another scrap. So we just did the same thing twice. That, again, was step 4. And if you're working with more than one sheet, I'll just put the little number 2 in front of each, and the instructions will say trim 2. I've been writing instructions for a long time, so I'm really trying to make it as clear as I can. Now we have some trimming instructions for the folding board. I saved this for the end because now you're all warmed up. I'm going to have you start out at a nice easy number, 11.5, keeping in mind that it's really important you stabilize this really heavy paper before you bring the blade down. Keep it from moving. Hear the difference in the way it sounds when you trim it. Then I'm going to slide down to 11 1/8. Hopefully that doesn't frighten you too badly, but 11 1/8 is halfway between 11 and 11 1/4. There's the medium size hash mark there. That's 11 1/8. Then 10 3/4. And then 10 3/8. 10 3/8 can be found halfway between 10 1/4 and 10.5. 10 3/8. Okay, now this paper is the size we need it to be to make the outer structure of our note card carrier. So this is actually 5 7/8 by 10 3/8. I sell this in a 12-inch sheet. So if you purchased a 12 by 12 sheet of this paper, you would be able to make 2 note card carriers from this. I'm going to put this on my pile to be scored. Now you've got these 3 pieces that are 3/8 inch wide, and you have one larger piece is actually a 1/2 inch. So the 1/2 inch piece is a scrap. And then these 3 pieces go in pocket B. All the instructions to trim your cut-aparts are listed down here at the bottom. None of them have a pocket name associated with it. These cut-aparts are actually designed to coincide with our Kintsugi themed card kit. And every image on here has a companion. But I adapted them to fit the note card carrier project. So in other words, you might have to trim a little bit more off of some of these greetings. To help you in that process later on, I actually took a photograph of the outside and inside of every card I made in my note card carrier, just in case you want to copy exactly what I did. Okay, but for now, we're just going to trim the art elements out so that that's done and you don't have to worry about doing it later. To get started, we need to remove the outer perimeter of our cut apart so that we begin with a nice 12-inch piece. So you look for that intersecting guideline, and I want you to line that up with the outside edge of your stainless steel blade of your trimmer. When you make that first cut, you will still have a little bit of an excess scrap here on the end. That's okay. That's just how it worked out. Rotate, line up those hash marks again on the other corners, and work your way around the entire piece to remove that little 1/8 inch easement. You can look here at the 12-inch mark, and that lines up with what I've got here. And then you just created 4 little 1/8 inch scraps. Now we're back home again. I'm going to follow the trimming instructions in step 6. So 11 3/4, 9. Now if you look, that should take you right between the artwork, and then 4 1/2. Rotate this piece and trim at 9 3/4, 6 1/2, 3 1/4. So now you have these individual pieces of artwork that you can use on your cards and some fussy cut leaves. I'm just going to set these aside in a different pile. Then the next strip we'll cut at 10 1/4, 6 3/4, and 3 1/4. Just gather up all those little pieces, set them aside, and then we'll trim this at 9, 6, and 3. These are innies for your cards, so they're greetings that match some of the other images we're trimming. And there is a narrow scrap. One more sheet to cut, and we're done with all the trimming required to make not only the note card carrier, the tabs, everything, but also the cards inside and all of their panels and artwork. So we need to remove the perimeter, that little 1/8 inch easement that we've worked into it so that we can start out with a nice accurate 12 by 12 piece. We did this in the snap ring project as well. Same basic step, but this time we're using artwork from a card kit rather than a page kit. Okay, so these pieces get thrown out. And I'm following now step 7. We'll cut at 11 1/2. 9 3/4. We hear that number a lot for some reason. 7 and 4 1/2. Now we're going to trim a bunch of narrow strips. These are innies for the cards. We always like to give you something for the outside and the inside. 10 3/4, 9 1/2, 8 1/4, 7, and 3 1/2. Okay, so you can set all of these pieces aside with your card making materials. Now here we need to trim a little scrap. So we'll start at 11 3/4, and then 10. Now we're going to make some squares. So 7 1/2, 5, 2 1/2. So just to kind of give you a little sneak peek, there's a little scrap there. See this heart? This heart was used in a double layer. So I have one of the hearts behind the belly band, and then I cut some frames off and I used the other heart on top of the belly band. And then I used my dimensional acrylic that is included in the product showcase to add a little dimension to the Kintsugi lines on my heart. So I hope you can see that. All right, this one's trimmed at 11, then 8 1/4, 5 1/2, 2 3/4. All of these wonderful elements we can use for making our cards. Lastly, we'll cut at 7 1/2, 5, 2 1/2. So here we have 3 really sweet little tags that say thinking of you, and then some more things you can fussy cut if you would like. And then there's this just strip of scrap. If you want, you can use this again. You could nest this maybe on the ivory for the outside belly band. That would be really nice. I think the grain direction's going the right way, but I will set that aside for now. Congratulations, that marks the end of the process required for the trimmer. Now I'm going to swap this out with a score pal. It's exactly what we did when we made our snap ring album. Go ahead and sort everything in that pile that we set aside. by size. So you have the folding board, you have some larger pieces, get 2 little skinny guys, and all the rest should be these card bases. Now you have 2 choices with these card bases. If you'll remember, we trimmed the paper in step 3 so that eventually when we folded these card bases, we'd be folding with the grain. So choice number 1 with scoring is to place this horizontally into your score pal. Score at 4 1/4. That's your half, right? And then bury the bump of the score line. The bump always goes on the inside of the fold, except when working with folding board. I'll talk more about that later. And now you have a nice folded card. If you want, you could burnish that. And I'm going to show you another option. Since we did plan so carefully, use your score pal in a different way. Use it as a jig. So take the card base that you've prepared, put it vertically into the score pal, and just bring the bottom corners up to the top. Make sure everything's tucked in nice and neat and straight in the corner, and then make your crease. Even with this heavy cardstock, it did a really nice job. Beautiful. Okay, so another time saver. Notice I burnished those folds, but what if I just simply fold, finger crease, set it aside, go to the next one. Let's say you're making holiday cards and you're going to make 100 cards. If you do it this way, it will save you so much time. You're skipping the scoring entirely, and your corners are lining up perfectly. And I'll show you one other time-saving trick. Oh, I have 2 card bases here. We don't want that. I'll show you one other time-saving trick for burnishing. I just love this. It just, the corners are lined up so much better if I do it that way. So here are all the cards I did not burnish. So what I can do is stack them up neatly. See the folds right now on the edge? They just need a little love. I will love them on this side, flip the entire stack over, burnish from this side, and now I have really beautiful creases all the way through the stack. I'm going to take all of these folded panels now and just place them in pocket C. We need to do a little bit more scoring. A couple things left. I'm going to have you take these narrow strips and score them at 5 and 5 1/2. So just place it in horizontally, score at 5 and 5 1/2. These will go into pocket B. Next, take one of the larger pieces of manila. This is 6 1/4 by 10 1/2. Place it vertically into the score pal and score it 5 3/4. Then you can score horizontally at 1/2. That's kind of a pain, but just kind of do a crossover if you're a righty. That's 1/2 of an inch. Oops, 1/2 of an inch. Then 5, 5 1/2, and 10. So I'm going to repeat that. Take the next manila, same thing. We're going to score vertically at 5 3/4, and then horizontally at 1/2, 5, 5 1/2, and 10. These 2 pieces are going to end up being those gorgeous pockets that hold our folio together. I am just going to plop those in pocket B for now, keep them safe and organized. Now the folding board is to be scored twice on the horizontal. And here's something really important. Folding board is just so thick and so heavy that scoring it, sometimes it's hard to stay in the channel provided for us on the score pal itself. Like you can just go wandering off. If that happens to you, it's not a big deal because most of this black surface is going to be covered with decorative paper. But I do have a solution. If you got the toolkit and you have any of our grid rulers that are like the 2x8 or the 3x14, you can place the grid ruler vertically on your score pal and use it as a little bit of a helper. Our first score number is 4 5/8. So what I'm going to do is count. Here's 4, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. Okay, that's 4 5/8, halfway between 4 1/2 and 4 3/4. I'm going to bring my ruler right up to the edge of the tip of my score, or my tool here. And then I'm going to bring the tool back toward me, and the ruler will help me stay inside the channel designated for 4 5/8. make about 3 or 4 passes, and you need to press firmly. And again, if you make some sort of a weird veer off in any direction, not a problem. One more score line, 5 3/4. That's pretty easy to find, especially on this one with the eighths. All the numbers are listed. So 5 3/4, engage, push firmly, bring that blade, that tool toward you. Notice I'm holding it more like a pencil. I see a lot of students doing it this way. My preferred hold or technique for this is to hold it more like a pencil. Make several passes to get a nice indentation on this material. I'm going to set this score pal aside now since we're done with it, and I'm going to take this and put it in pocket A. I'm going to take those manila papers back out of pocket B and grab a cutting mat and a craft knife to just do a little bit more prep work. What's important to remember about these folio pockets that we're going to make is that they are a mirror of each other. Do you see that one angle points down to the center here, and the other one is a reflection of that? So we're just going to follow this process. I have 2 illustrations for you at the top of page 3 in your instructions so that we make basically a mirror of this item. So we'll just make the one on the left first and then follow to make the one on the right next. So we're going to make an angled line to remove a triangular shape from the upper right corner of this piece. I have it positioned horizontally in front of me, and this is important. The bumps of the score lines should be facing up. It's easier to see the scores that way. And the 1/2 inch score that you made on the long edge should be at the bottom. I need to remove this area, and it's going to be 1 inch from the right side of the spine here, the score line, 1 inch from that. And I'm using the grid on my cutting mat to help me find that 1 inch mark. So every cube on here is a 1/2 inch, so that's 1 inch. Then I need to find 4 inches from the top edge. Now where is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's right there. Easy. I'm going to cut straight from the 4 inch mark I made and stop when I reach the vertical score line. Then from that line, which is right there, from that spot, I'm going to find the other pencil mark I made and cut. Now this is really heavyweight paper. It's fine to make a second pass. It's critical you're going to hear when the blade makes its way through onto the cutting mat. If you don't like to use a craft knife, simply mark all of this with your pencil and trim it out with scissors. Not a big deal. The craft knife is just going to do it in one nice smooth single stroke. A pencil mark with scissors is a little bit less accurate, but not enough that you would notice. We have one other cut to make on this folio piece, 4 inches down from this edge. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can make a line there if you want and just use scissors also. I can also show you another way. I've made so many of these, I have tons of different ways I can do it. This is a 1/2 inch area we're scoring. We're going to remove the upper portion of this tab. And I used my craft knife to do it. You could also use scissors. Do you see how this was removed? That matches what you see in this picture right here. Okay, so now from the bottom, we're going to cut some darts. Starting at the left edge, notice the notches over here, the big notch. I'm going to cut away just the score line, stopping at the horizontal intersection. It's a little tiny dart that we're taking out. Same here. Now don't make a big dart, just enough to remove the score. And here, the tiniest tab ever. I'm going to cut toward the intersecting score line here and come from the side and remove that score line as well. So that corner has been removed. Now this is ready to become a pocket. I need to repeat this for the other side, but the mirror version. Start out by making sure that the bumps of your scores are facing up and then the 1/2 inch score is at the bottom. And I'm just going to mark 1 inch from this nearest score line here and count 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are my little slits. This time I can just take my ruler if I wanted to, line them up, and just make that cut with my craft knife. I didn't have the best positioning there, so apologies. Okay, then lastly I need to cut from the end of the slit up to my pencil mark. Usually I try to put my ruler down and then pivot up to the other mark. Make sure you are in a comfortable position. Make 2 passes if you need to. You can hear when the tip of the blade is making contact with the cutting mat, and that removes this one. And then I'm going to remove this little section here. Again, do this in a position that is most comfortable for you, or use scissors. You don't have to be a craft knife hero. Okay, so now do you see how this is a mirror? Everything happened the same. We just have to make our little notches. So I'm going to start from the right edge this time. Do you see the notch? I'm going to cut a small dart to remove the remove the score line here to make a tiny tab. Just taking out all those little darts. And then lastly, I'm going to remove the entire corner. There's some strategy behind this, I promise. Ta-da! So score lines are up and we have mirrors. Looking very good. Now if you accidentally made two the same, you'll have to flip one of them. That should work okay, but I just like to keep my orientation the same way all the way through and make the mirrors. These can go back in pocket B. Those are all ready to go. Pretty much the rest of this is coasting downhill, so you can clean up your work area and get ready to assemble the outside cover. And the pockets come in handy right about now because all we do is just take everything out of pocket A and we have what we need. So here is our folding board material. I want you to place it in front of you so that the bumps of the scores are facing up. So you know that rule, I before E, except after C? That's the case with folding board. Always bury the bumps of your score lines, except when you're using folding board. Then those bumps should be facing on the outside of your finished piece. So make sure the bumps of your score lines are facing up, and then let's go ahead and adhere the panels that we pulled out of pocket A, whatever orientation or arrangement you want. And then we can cover the spine area as well. So you can see very little scores here, and you have these beautiful papers all lining up perfectly. For the adhesion, you may use bookbinding glue in a needle tip applicator, or you can use your favorite adhesive. So I'm just going to reach for my favorite adhesive right now. This is my ATG gun, adhesive transfer gun, and I always say it's the fastest adhesive in the West. If you are a prolific card maker, there is nothing more economical as far as adhesive goes, and that's regarding your time and the environment and the cost of operation. Okay, so this will be placed centered right here, and then you can cover the spine as well. Lovely. Now flip this over and you have one more piece of paper from pocket A. It's another spine cover for the inside of your folio. It should fit in there perfectly. And at this point now we've identified this is the outside front cover, this is the inside. So gently fold on those score lines, and it's going to fight you a little bit. This folding board is almost like matte board. It definitely is sturdy. It is made for the luxury packaging industry like perfume and makeup. And so that's why I chose this product. It's archival. It's made in the United States. I absolutely love it. So I'm just kind of gently creasing really carefully. I don't want to rip this. So I'm just doing my best to sort of shape this into a book shape. And there it is. Really nice, sturdy, heavy duty. Cover is done. We can set that aside just for the moment. I'm going to go back and empty the contents of pocket B. And there's a little bit more in here, and we have a few more tasks we need to accomplish. We're going to take these folio pockets here. We can place them so that the bumps are facing up. And remember those little strips we made earlier? These are designed to support the spine of these pockets so that when you're, and that's going to end up being right here on the outside. So there's a piece of black folding board hidden behind here that makes this extremely durable. These pieces are just slightly on the long side, so I need to shave off maybe 1/4 of an inch tops. Don't forget to do that. So you can pretty much lay this in there to confirm that you're not extending into the scored area at this lower tab. No problem. Now, if you had a chance to take some of our bookbinding glue and put it in a needle tip applicator, that's great. That you'll have that if you got our toolkit. If you didn't, just use your favorite, preferably liquid glue, but if you don't have that, just whatever glue you can get your hands on. I love how this dispenses. And then I'm just going to place that into the scored area on the bump side of the score line. So your bumps are facing up. I hope that makes sense. And I'll apply this second piece here. Now I also decided to add support to the tabs. And so I'm going to take the third piece of folding board that I have. I'm going to cut pieces just to fit these tabs. So there's a little score line here. It's a 1/2 inch wide, and the 3/8 inch piece will fit in there perfectly to give me some nice structure to the top of that tab. I like that. Just frame that up nicely in there. And that glue, once it's dry, those tab supports aren't going to go anywhere. Make sure you're gluing this to the bump side of the score lines. That's going to end up being the inside. Okay, we'll set these tabs aside for just a little bit. Take one of these pieces and turn it over, and here we have this angled area. And then from pocket B, we also had these 2 panels. Take one of the panels and center it within the score lines of the angled area. And you see there's the score line. This should fit in there perfectly, like a nested card, just right. See that? Don't adhere it, just hold it in place, nice and firmly. Flip and draw a pencil line right on the edge of that angle that you have. So now I have a line here. What we want to do is remove this area so that it nests onto the pocket, plus another 1/8 of an inch that way. My cutting mat, my craft knife, and my ruler. Every cube on the ruler represents an 1/8 of an inch, so if I just put the first cubed line along my pencil mark, I can then take my craft knife, or you could take a pencil and cut with scissors. I'm removing that triangular shape plus 1/8 of an inch. Now what happens when I put this on my folio? It nests perfectly. I'm going to set that aside for just a moment. Take the other one, and you cannot, it's not a good idea to repeat this with the same template. Lay this on top of the other pocket, angled area, nested and centered. Hold it and flip it. Draw your line and X out what you're taking away. Plus we're removing another 1/8 of an inch, right? I'm drawing that on there so you can really keep track of what you're doing, and you may do the same. You don't want to go the wrong direction. You'll know it if you do, though. Firm pressure on both the penknife and the ruler to remove the triangular shape. And I'll double check my fit. That is very nice. Look at that. Okay, so now I think we should just go ahead and attach this. I'm going to show you how I use my bookbinding glue to attach things. So if I just squeeze some around the perimeter, that way I know my edges have some really good adhesion. And then I just do the wiggle. That's a technical term. And I will center this into that angled pocket area on the side with the indentations of the score lines. That's the outside of your pocket, remember. Okay, don't put this on the side with the black. That's one of the reasons I had that listed as the first task. It helps identify the wrong side of the pocket. Wiggle. It can be very quick once you get used to using an adhesive like this. So we have all of these beautiful score lines, right? Let's bury the bumps of all of these score lines. You can just use your fingertips to turn everything in. Make sure you get every score, even the ones at the spine. The pocket will have a front, right? And you want you don't want to have edges. You don't want to have unfinished edges facing you. You want them facing the back of the book. So that's what my plan will do for you. Have the pocket with the angle on your right, and then there's a tab on the left. Turn in on the tab and place adhesive just on the tab area, not on the little flap kind of at the bottom, but just on the larger scored area. And then bring this to it and set this other tab on top of it. It's much easier to assemble a rectangular shape. You're going to have nice 90-degree angles going on, and then you can start to see that pocket form. Beautiful, right? Now, if we go to the bottom, remember this is the front. So here's the order. I want to bring the back tab in first, then the side tabs, and then the front flap. Again, my reason for that is this is the front of the pocket. If I did it in the other order, I'd have this icky edge facing me, and I don't want that. So, back tab in. I'm just going to put a little dab of glue on the small tabs, turn those in. It's going to give me a nice strong base. Then just squiggle some glue along the bottom edge of that flap. Bring it down. I will set this on my work surface for it to bond for a moment. And I have a gorgeous angled pocket. We need to repeat that for the other side, but in the other direction. So again, we started by, now this is with the angle on the left. While we're looking at the bumps of the score lines, we're burying the bumps. A lot of people think it's the other way around, so it's easy to remember, bury the bump. Now this time we'll do it the opposite direction, so take this flap on the right. We'll add our bookbinding glue just to the flap. Bring this over and set the tab on top of the glue so we have a real attractive front of our pocket. This is just good pocket making advice. You know, you can make a pocket of any size, any depth, any height, any width, using these exact skills. The method of assembly, whether it's angled or not, these are good tips for just general box making, making everything look beautiful, planning ahead for front, back, all that type of things. Where how to miter and create those little darts. You can use these little methods in the future as well. Turn in those side tabs. This is very thirsty paper here. I'll add my glue, close that last flap, and then place it down so I can get a nice bond. We are getting so close to having this completed. Now I'm going to bury the bumps here. Now if you happen to have a corner chomper or a corner punch, a corner rounding punch, you can, on the chomper you can choose a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch setting. I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch setting, and I'm going to round the bottom corners of this little strip. Leave that as it is. So I'm folding in the tabs by burying the bumps here, and I'll round the opposite corners. Now in pocket B, you also had these narrow strips. You decide how you want these to be allocated, direction and so on, and round just one end of these as well. I suppose I could have rounded them at the same time. Certainly capable of doing that. Let's nest these onto the tabs. They should fit perfectly if everything went according to the plan when we did the trimming. Sometimes you have to adapt. I've done that too. We need to hang this basically onto the back of our folio so that holds all the cards in the pocket when it's installed. So I want to install this about 1/2 inch from this square corner. So to find that, I'm going to use my cutting mat. So if I lay this corner into one of my measurements from one line to the next, is just 1/2 inch. I have that marked. I'll do the same on the other lid, other cover pocket. Okay, I don't even know if I'm making a lid, a pocket, or a cover. I've done all of them. So now I'm going to take some of our bookbinding glue. Just add it to this tab and line up the tab area just to the first score line. Make sure it's only the first score line. You want the supported area to be free of glue. And just hang that onto your folio pocket. I'm going to repeat this for the other side. I see some real action happening here now. And remember when I told you not to lose those hook and loop dots? This is why. You don't want to lose them. I'm going to cut them in half. Now, hook and loop, like the hook side is the real scratchy side, and the loop side is the real soft side. I just like to have them match. So if you're going to put hook on the back of the tab, put loop on the pocket, okay? Just whatever you do, just make sure it matches. Leave the hook and loop attached and remove one of the backing. Now the backing I'm removing is from the hook side, but totally up to you. I'm going to open the tab and just place this on the back. Then remove the backing of what's there. And when you close it, make sure that this is at a 90-degree angle right here. Nice and level. Just kind of attach from the side so it bonds. I'm going to repeat the same thing. So I had to remove the adhesive from the hook side. Open the tab, attach the dot, then remove the backing. Check your 90-degree angle so that it really does hold the way it's supposed to. Forgive me, by the way, if I don't follow the steps of the instructions exactly. I'm crafting from the heart, as I've said in the past, so it may not be precisely if you're following instructions, but I will get all the tasks in, just maybe not. Sometimes if the order doesn't matter, I just kind of go for it. So here we are. I've grabbed the cover. Just make sure you know at this point what you want the front to be. I've decided that's what I want. When we install the pockets, make sure they angle toward the spine. Don't do it this way. I mean, if you did, it won't be the end of the world, but I think this is kind of what we're after so that when you close the book, it has this nice finished edge. I will be using my bookbinding glue with my needle tip applicator for this step, especially because my item is dimensional. Notice how I'm holding this up off of my work surface while I apply the glue, just to prevent getting glue onto my project. The wet glue is super nice for this because once I land on my cover, I have time to, the technical term would be finagle this into its perfect home. You can kind of have a little bit of a reveal, tiny reveal all the way around. Now open this, and here's a little trick for you. Take your ruler, bring it down while applying some pressure, and that's like you have a third hand to help you burnish that paper onto the folding board. Repeat that for the other side. So I'll apply the glue and open the tab and burnish. That is really taking some beautiful shape. I hope you agree. It's so elegant, so classy. I could give this to my neighbor Sylvia. She's 84, the picture of class, and I think she would really think this is quite fabulous. Okay, so now the belly band time has come so that this can be trained to hold itself together. Take the end so that it's at the middle, and just start going around the carrier. Now, here's a mistake that I think I made on my last one. I made this a little on the tight side. I can barely get it on and off. You also don't want it too loose that it's falling off, but just make sure that it's just making those bends real gently. And then once you kind of figure out where your bends are going to be, I remove the band and then make firm creases in those spots. So you can kind of just, if you pinch it a little bit while it's on the carrier, and then firm up the folds. I'm going to do a double check to make sure that this is good. Oh yes, that feels really nice. Feels like it's going to slide off very well. So at this point, bookbinding glue, I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the front of this flap and on the outside edge of the other one. It's a great way to bond just two edges, no matter how long or short. This is quite short. And don't over tighten it at this point. I think that's where I went wrong on that last one. Because the paper is printed, the ink or the glue takes a little bit longer to dry. Now for my pile of cut aparts, I do have these two hearts that I'm not going to be using for a card. And I think I'm just going to take my scissors and cut along this gold frame. Next, I'm going to make sure this is centered and kind of where I want it, and then I'm going to place this behind and center it where I would like it. And then this can be placed on top one of two ways. You can just glue it, or you could also use the foam adhesive circles that we provided to you in your toolkit. I happen to have some of those foam adhesive circles here. I use them for everything. They can be cut in half. They have this handy pull tab, which eliminates the frustration that I often feel when trying to remove the backing from these things. You just grab it and pull, and then you're done with it. I love that. Okay, so now I'm going to use this and line up my heart with the frame underneath it. So I'm creating a sandwich. That way there's no seam on the belly band. Another lesson you can carry over. So if you're making a belly band, put the seam front and center and make a sandwich with two other elements when you can pop dot. And to me, I think that's just a very nice, classy looking front outside cover. Don't you agree? Just kind of says, love ya. Okay, now what goes on the inside of this thing? Well, first of all, I can get my envelopes out of the way. I have 4 super smooth A2 sized envelopes with the square flap I can insert into the left pocket. Look at that perfect fit. I'll close this again. And now we need to move on to pocket C. Now, if you take everything out of pocket C, you're going to find that series of card bases that we folded earlier, plus panels in 2 sizes. So you'll want to sort through what you have in the pocket, and you'll notice there are smaller panels, slightly larger panels, and then the card bases. So if you want to freestyle this and assemble these cards however you just follow your own muse, that's fine. Some people like to have a little bit more guidance, and that's why on page 4 I have included all of those images. So if I were to just deal these out, and kind of this is how Club Scrap card kit membership works. We do the trimming, and then with filing in pockets, and then we deal things out. So I'm going to deal out 2 ivory vertical cards, and then a manila and a slate. So these are the 4 verticals that I made. And again, you can choose how you want to assemble your cards. They can be any way you want. Then how about a horizontal navy, a horizontal manila, and then another horizontal slate and a horizontal navy. That's kind of how I have them laid out here in the instructions. Now we have these nesting panels to distribute. So I'm going to begin with a navy on the first 2 ivory card bases, a slate on the manila, a manila on the slate. Then on these horizontal ones, I've got an ivory on the navy, a slate going on manila. Let's add another manila onto the slate, and then an ivory onto the navy. Now every card except one will have one of these decorative panels on it. It's this one. This is the one I just, for whatever reason, did not add a printed panel. And it's just the way the math worked out on this part of the project. So now we've got a lot of beauty already in place. Finally, you can follow along with these images to figure out what goes on each card and what goes inside of each card. You could also empty pocket D in here. These are decorative options. That's why that ended up in pocket D. And so you have all these different strips. Like for example, you could add a slate strip to this card for a little bit of an anchoring device. You could maybe nest a quote onto that. You could add a navy panel maybe to this card since it didn't get a printed panel. How about an ivory panel here? Maybe a navy strip, an ivory strip. So many cool things you can do with your scraps to kind of extend the life of your cards. All of these have potential to be used either inside or outside. And again, that's from Pocket D for, your discretion. All of our cut aparts that we trimmed earlier can be added to these cards. And in order to add them, they have to be adapted just a little bit. These cards were designed for a specific card size. So for example, this is one of the sentiments we'll be using on this card, but I'm just going to trim out that portion of it, just the text portion. I already went ahead and did that, trimmed it to fit this panel. Use your grid ruler to grab the measurement of this panel, which is actually 2.5 by 3.5 inches. And then you can just, subtract 1/4 inch, trim this to 2.25 by 3.25. It will fit on there perfectly. You can add ribbon. All of the ribbon that was included in the showcase kit will help you finish off these cards as well. So this quote, "The world breaks everyone," this one gets a thinking of you on the inside. Then "I am so glad that you are spinning around this crazy little planet with me." That's gonna get, I also added this element from the cut aparts along with "Happy Birthday." This "You deserve more than just a simple birthday card." That can be trimmed to fit onto the blue panel here. And I also added this from the cut apart sheet. Here I have a fussy cut heart that can be added, along with It's Your Birthday. This can be trimmed or torn to fit onto that ivory panel. And then how about these insides here? For the inside, you can put, you deserve more than a simple birthday card. Oh, well, happy birthday. And then try to enjoy it with this one that says, it's your birthday, and we are all compelled to make you the awkward center of our unwanted attention. Now, moving on to these horizontal cards. Again, I just had to take away just a small amount of this paper from the perimeter of the cut apart to have this fit. She is a beautiful piece of broken pottery put back together by her own hands, and a critical world judges her cracks while missing the beauty of how she made herself whole again. And I swear that quote just gets me choked up every time I read it. For the inside of the card, you can add a "You've got this" along with a "Thinking of you." And I like that one so much we can even add a second one just like that, with a "Thinking of you" and a "You've got this" on the inside. For the last two cards, it seems to me that we have a lot of story left to tell. And then on the inside, we can say, here's to the next chapter, happy birthday, and then you can put a tag inside of each of those. Again, any other small scraps that you have left can be incorporated. Now let me just point this out. These still can be allocated, but all of the paper that you had in your kit for this particular project, of all of that, this is the only thing that's left. And like I said, it can be used. And that's the economy of approaching a project this way. This is how we do it with our Club Scrap memberships, the page kit, the card kit. Most of our projects work like this, where you first sort the paper, trim it and file it, and then each pocket helps dictate a quick route to the finish line for your creative potential. Now, if you are a stamper, maybe you're like, I don't like all these images printed for me, I want them to be stamped. Well, what's neat is if you still follow the trimming protocols, you just simply take out the prepared image, flip it to the plain side, and then stamp your own artwork, your own sentiments onto these panels, because either way, they're still designed to fit. Now I'm going to just simply stack up these cards. You know how to adhere, and I'm sure that you have the creativity within you to recreate these cards. I'll give you one final tour of the ones in my note card carrier. And again, you know, make your own darn cards, right? They can be any style, any expressions that you want. So these are the vertical ones that were designed. You can see how various ribbons were stapled, and I also used quite a bit of foam adhesive to pop those front greetings. This is the one without the decorative panel, but isn't that beautiful with just the ribbon simply added? Here we have the fussy cut hearts, a loop of ribbon sandwiched between this and the mat. Looks so nice. So those were the vertical ones, and of course each one has the inner sentiment trimmed to fit. That's going to need to be trimmed to 4¼ inches wide to match the size of the card base. Now the horizontal cards also just can be very simple. The addition of just a little swatch of ribbon stapled to that tag adds so much to the inside. Here's the other one. And then we have this one positioned at an angle on the card base. This was matted with one of those printed scraps. And then here, this one's just straight on with a peaking border on both sides. This was a scrap from one of the other cut-aparts. And then you still have an assortment of various things. Love you most, that's all, the end, I win. So you have different things that you can use as well. If these are appropriate, these are just going to be extras because we had an innie and outie for each of these 8 cards, and our card kits generally make 12 cards. Once your design phases are done, you can set out your cards, your lid here, and use the gold dimensional acrylic to add some special touches to these cards. It just is going to add a little bit of dimension to, again, enhance what you already see there. So the artwork really plays well into this item. Now that you understand how this is constructed, what would be very easy is for you to take papers from your stash at home, if you happen to have additional paper on hand. Simply make substitutions for all the papers I've specified here, follow the same instructions once again, and create another note card carrier for yourself or for a friend. I hope you enjoyed this project and that you're inspired to make it again. Have fun!